53 seconds. That's all it took for a live CNN debate to explode when Justice Alito leaned in and spat at Jasmine Crockett. "You'll always be ghetto trash." Millions watched as she reached into her jacket for a silver USB that could shatter the highest court's walls. If you had the proof to take down one of America's most powerful judges, would you dare to press play? The studio lights burned white hot, pouring over the polished surface of the CNN special set until everything gleamed. The banner in the lower third screamed in bold red, "Justice under oath live." Cameras moved with slow precision, gliding past the faces of an audience holding their breath. Anderson Cooper leaned forward at the desk, voice calm but heavy, as though he could already feel the storm brewing in the air. The topic tonight was judicial ethics, a subject that sounded dry until you remembered the stakes. For weeks, headlines had buzzed with whispers of questionable conduct in America's highest court. Now, two people sat across from each other under the same glare of light, one a congresswoman with a reputation for never backing down, the other a justice with decades of rulings under his belt. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the weight of what might happen. Jasmine Crockett sat poised, her navy blazer crisp against the glare of the cameras. A gold pin on her lapel flashed under the lights, but it was her posture that commanded the most attention. Shoulders squared, chin lifted, eyes locked forward. She had fought her way through courtrooms, protests, and political hearings, carrying the voices of people too often ignored. To many older Americans watching from home, she was more than a politician. She was a defender of dignity. Across from her sat Samuel Alito, the man whose rulings had left deep marks on the country's legal landscape. Tonight he wore a dark suit and a blood-red tie, the kind of tie you wear when you intend to make a point. His face was unreadable, but the tension at the corners of his mouth betrayed him. There was an unspoken promise in his eyes he wasn't here to exchange pleasantries. The audience was a living cross-section of America. Retired judges leaned forward in their seats, civil rights advocates sat with folded arms, and journalists gripped their pens like weapons. In the back row, ordinary citizens clutched their programs, knowing they were about to witness something historic. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence hit like a wall, cold, unyielding, pressing against every chest in the room. Anderson Cooper's gaze swept the table, his tone deliberate as he addressed the viewers at home. "We begin tonight," he said, "with opening statements on judicial ethics and what accountability should look like for those at the very top." His words hung in the air, each syllable carrying a challenge. The camera pulled back, framing both Crockett and Alito in one perfect shot, a picture of two forces destined to collide. The clock on the studio wall ticked once, then again. Every eye in the room locked on the table, as if everyone could sense that the first words spoken might set the tone for the rest of the night. But no one expected what Alito would say next. Jasmine's voice was steady as she laid out her case. She was detailing a recent conflict of interest scandal, her words sharp but measured. Every sentence hit with the precision of a courtroom cross-examination. The audience leaned in, hanging on each point. Alito shifted in his seat, a slow lean forward, his eyes locked on hers like a predator sizing up prey. Then his voice cut through the studio, low but dripping with contempt. "You'll always be ghetto trash." It was as if someone had pulled the plug on the room. Every sound vanished, swallowed by the weight of those words. Anderson Cooper froze mid-breath, his hand hovering above his notes. The red studio light suddenly felt colder, harsher. The camera tightened on Jasmine's face. No trembling lip, no gasp. Just eyes that burned with a heat you couldn't mistake, the kind of heat that came from holding back a storm. Her jaw tightened. The faintest lift of her chin told the world she was not about to break. Across the country, televisions flickered with the frozen image of that moment. Social media exploded within seconds, hashtags firing up, clips already being replayed in slow motion. Comments flooded timelines, disbelief, outrage, admiration. People weren't just watching, they were taking sides. In the studio, the air grew heavy. You could feel the audience wrestling with whether to gasp, boo, or stay silent. Even Alito's own supporters in the room shifted uncomfortably. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Jasmine's fingers curled slightly on the desk, not from anger she couldn't control, but from anger she was mastering. This wasn't the time for shouting. This was the time to decide exactly how and when to strike back. Anderson's eyes darted between them, sensing the broadcast had shifted from debate to something far more personal. The cameras stayed locked on Jasmine, waiting for her response. Every second of silence stretched, pulling the audience tighter into the moment. What do you do when a man with the power to shape your country tries to strip you down with one sentence? How do you answer an insult that millions just heard? Jasmine drew in a slow breath. It wasn't rushed and it wasn't shallow. It was the kind of breath you take when you know the next move could define the entire moment. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't give Alito even a flicker of the reaction he might have been hoping for. Her silence settled over the table like a thick, unshakable fog. In the front row, her supporters absorbed the insult as if it had landed squarely on them. A woman in a church hat clutched her pearls. A young law student leaned forward, eyes wide with disbelief. Fists tightened, back straightened. It was no longer just Jasmine's fight, the room had claimed it as her own. One man in the third row shifted in his seat. A black veteran, his navy blazer worn at the elbows, sat with his medals pinned proudly to his chest. His voice was low, but it carried in the eerie stillness. Don't let him take your power. Jasmine's gaze slid toward him for just a heartbeat, and the faintest nod passed between them. It was enough. She let a small smile form, not warm but sharp at the edges. It was the look of someone who had just decided the ending to a story before anyone else knew it had even begun. Alito's words hadn't weakened her. They had given her the opening she needed, the weapon of perfect timing. The camera held on her face, hungry for a crack in her composure. But there was none. Her eyes were steady, her breathing measured. In living rooms across America, viewers leaned in without realizing it, sensing she was holding something powerful back. Something that would not be wasted on the heat of the moment. Alito shifted, crossing and uncrossing his hands. Silence was a language he didn't speak. Men like him thrived on control, and control came from setting the pace. Jasmine had taken that away without saying a word. From somewhere in the audience came a faint murmur, not loud enough to break the moment, but enough to remind everyone that this wasn't just a debate. It was a reckoning. Anderson Cooper's pen hovered over his notepad, forgotten. The cameras rolled on, capturing every second of the standoff. Silence can be heavier than the loudest shout. It can sit on your chest until you can't breathe. Jasmine understood that. This wasn't retreat. This wasn't fear. It was a fuse burning slow until the blast could no longer be contained. Sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's the storm before the strike. What storm is Jasmine about to unleash 48 hours earlier that night was quiet except for the hum of the city outside Jasmine's apartment window. A knock at the door came without warning, firm, deliberate 3 beats. No name, no return address, just a small plain package resting on her welcome mat like it had been placed there by a ghost. Inside was a silver USB drive, cold in her palm. Beneath it, a single folded note in block letters, "Play this if he crosses the line." The handwriting was sharp, impatient, like the sender knew she wouldn't need more explanation. Her heartbeat quickened, a dull drum in her ears. She sat at her desk, the lamp casting a circle of gold over the dark wood. The USB lay in the center, daring her to pick it up again. She didn't touch her laptop yet, not until she'd thought about who might have sent it and why it had come now, just days before the debate. The risks were obvious. Playing something on live television without knowing exactly what it contained could backfire in 100 different ways. Defamation, legal challenges, retaliation. And yet there was a pull, a sense that whatever was on this drive was not meant to gather dust. Jasmine reached for her phone and dialed Lawrence Tribe. The veteran constitutional lawyer answered on the second ring, his voice low and measured even at this late hour. She explained the package, the note, the possible target. There was a pause on the other end, long enough for her to know he understood the gravity. "You open it," Tribe said finally, "only if you're willing to deal with everything that comes after. And if it's what I think it might be, you'll change the conversation in this country overnight." His words landed heavy but not unwelcome. She had lived her career knowing moments like this didn't come twice. Jasmine placed the USB in a small black case and locked it in her desk drawer. She wouldn't play it yet, not until she had the perfect moment, the moment when the truth would hit the hardest and be impossible to ignore. But as she leaned back in her chair, A question gnawed at her louder than the city outside. Was the voice on that tape really who she thought it was? The studio was still frozen in that heavy silence. Every camera stayed locked on Jasmine, the lights catching the faint rise and fall of her breath. Then slowly her right hand slipped into the inside pocket of her blazer. Fingers closed around the cold, familiar shape. When her hand emerged, the silver USB glinted under the hot studio lights. A ripple of confusion moved through the audience, the kind you could feel even without hearing. Anderson Cooper leaned in, eyebrows tight. "Congresswoman? What's that?" His tone was steady, but there was a flicker of something else, anticipation. Jasmine didn't hesitate. The truth she said, voice low but carrying. And it speaks for itself. The words didn't need dressing up. They landed sharp, cutting through the stale air between her and Alito. For the first time all night, his eyes darted away. One of the floor producers signaled to a technician in the control booth. The USB changed hands silver against black headset wires and glowing monitors. The technician moved quickly, plugging it into a port screens, flickering to life. A quiet gasp came from somewhere in the second row. Alito shifted in his chair. He clasped his hands tighter, knuckles pale. The expression he wore now wasn't the same confident mask from before. There was a shadow creeping in the look of a man who suddenly isn't sure what's about to happen. Jasmine just watched him, her face unreadable, the smallest trace of that sharp-edged smile playing at her lips. On the monitors, a loading bar crawled forward. The director's voice crackled in the headsets, confirming audio and video were synced. Anderson's gaze flicked to Jasmine, then to the technician, then back to Jasmine. He didn't need to ask another question. The moment was already speaking loud enough. The audience leaned forward in unison, like the entire room was drawn toward whatever was about to appear. Phones were raised discreetly. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" but no one answered. The studio's hum faded into near silence. Even the lights seemed to burn quieter. On the screens, the file name appeared short, unassuming, almost ordinary. And yet everyone knew nothing about the next few seconds would be ordinary at all. In seconds, the nation would hear what was never meant for public ears. A click. Then the studio speakers filled with a voice everyone recognized instantly. Samuel Alito. Clear. Unmistakable. There was no courtroom formality in his tone now, just a man speaking plainly to a lobbyist, his words as casual as they were damning. "If we adjust the language in the ruling, the coastal property will be yours," he said. The lobbyist laughed low and knowing. "And the beach house." Alito's reply was almost a whisper, but the microphone caught it. "Consider it done." The sound hit the room like a slap. A wave of gasps rippled through the audience. Some covered their mouths, others shook their heads, eyes wide. In homes across America, viewers were leaning closer to their TVs, replaying the words in their heads, wondering if they'd really just heard what they thought they did. The camera swung to Alito. A heartbeat ago, his face had been frozen in mild surprise, like someone trying to decide if a joke was aimed at them. Now the surprise was gone. His jaw tightened, shoulders squared. The mask of defense dropped into place. Phones lit up across the audience as fingers flew over screens. Twitter was already exploding. Within seconds, Alito Resign was climbing each tweet more outraged than the last. "This can't be real. He needs to go now. Is this who we trust with our laws?" The comments weren't slowing. They were multiplying. Anderson Cooper stayed silent, letting the audio run. Each new sentence was heavier than the last. Alito and the lobbyist talked casually about shifting timelines, leaning on other justices, keeping certain details off the record. The casualness made it worse. It wasn't a one-off slip. It was a pattern. Jasmine didn't move. Her hands rested on the table, her eyes never leaving him. She wasn't looking at the man. She was looking at the unraveling of his authority in real time. The more he sat there, the more the silence pressed in on him, making the weight of his own voice impossible to escape. The file ended with a final clink of glassware in the background, like a toast to the deal. The screens went black. The air in the studio was different now, heavier, charged, almost dangerous. If this is just the beginning, how much deeper does the corruption go? Alito leaned toward his mic, his voice low but sharp. "This is doctored audio." The words were crisp, rehearsed, like he'd kept them in his back pocket for a moment exactly like this. His eyes swept the room, daring someone to challenge him. Jasmine didn't flinch. She rose from her seat, slow and deliberate, the way a trial lawyer stands before delivering the line the jury will never forget. "Then you won't mind us calling an expert right now?" Her tone was calm, almost casual, but it cut through the air like glass breaking. The audience reacted instantly. A ripple of murmurs surged into open applause, quick and loud. Some stood clapping harder with every beat. Others just smiled, eyes fixed on Jasmine, as if they knew she'd just taken control of the room. Alito's jaw clenched. "This is outrageous," he said, but there was a flicker of unease under the mask. His hands tightened together on the desk, knuckles whitening. For a man used to controlling the pace, he suddenly looked like he was trying to keep up. Jasmine's gaze didn't leave him. "You claim the tape is fake," she said, each word steady. "So let's prove it right here, right now." There was no raise in her voice. She didn't need one. The power was in the certainty, and she had it all. Anderson Cooper glanced toward the control booth. The floor producers were already moving, whispering into headsets. The tension in the studio shifted. It wasn't just suspense anymore. It was the anticipation of a reveal, the kind you couldn't rewind or edit out. Alito adjusted his tie, eyes flicking toward the cameras. "This isn't the proper venue," for he began, but stopped when the applause swelled again. The audience wasn't just on Jasmine's side, they were urging her to push harder. Jasmine folded her arms, the faintest smile crossing her face. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was the look of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen next. She turned slightly toward the control booth as if to give the signal. What if the expert was already listening in? The giant screen behind the moderator flickered to life. For a split second, it was just static. Then the face of Lawrence Tribe came into focus, the legendary constitutional scholar, his sharp eyes framed by silver hair speaking from a dimly lit office lined with law books. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that told you everyone knew exactly who he was. "Congresswoman Crockett," he began, his voice measured, but carrying the weight of decades. "I've reviewed the audio in question." He paused, glancing directly into the camera, as if to let the moment stretch. "It is authentic. There is no evidence of manipulation, splicing, or editing. The voice on that tape is Samuel Alito's." Gasps broke from the audience. A few clapped instinctively before remembering this wasn't over yet. Alito's face hardened, his eyes narrowing toward the screen, like he could intimidate the pixels into silence. But Tribe continued, his tone sharpening. "This recording reveals a serious breach of judicial ethics," he said. "If verified in a formal inquiry, and I have no doubt it will be, this could rise to the level of impeachment." The word impeachment seemed to hang in the air, heavy and electric. People in the gallery shifted forward in their seats as if the very floor had just tilted. Anderson Cooper glanced at Alito, but the justice didn't speak. His hands remained locked together on the desk, fingers digging into one another. Tribe went on, laying out how the conversation in the audio violated conflict of interest statutes and undermined public trust in the judiciary. Each sentence was a nail hammered with precision. The audience was no longer just listening. They were processing the scale of what they just heard. This wasn't political theater anymore. It was a formal accusation delivered by one of the most respected legal minds in the country. Cameras captured every reaction, widened eyes, clenched jaws, the slow shake of a head. Jasmine stood perfectly still, letting Tribe's words fill the room. She didn't need to speak. The truth was speaking for her. Alito, for once, didn't seem to have a ready answer. His defense had been stripped down to silence. And then a new witness stepped forward from the shadows. The screen behind the moderator shifted again. The image of Lawrence Tribe faded, replaced by a grainy video feed from an undisclosed location. A man appeared, mid-40s, wearing a plain button-down, the kind of face that carried both fatigue and resolve. His voice was steady when he spoke. "My name is Daniel Mercer. I served as Justice Alito's clerk for 3 years." A hush fell over the room. Mercer's eyes didn't waver as he continued. "I can confirm I was present for a phone call nearly identical to the one you just heard. Same lobbyist, same promise, different property." The words landed like blows, each one tightening the noose around Alito's defense. Jasmine's gaze stayed locked on the screen. Anderson Cooper glanced toward Alito, but the justice didn't meet his eyes. Instead, Alito shifted in his seat, running a finger under his collar. A bead of sweat caught the light sliding down his temple. Mercer went further. This wasn't an isolated incident. There were others, meetings in private homes, dinners at exclusive clubs, financial discussions that should never have touched the ears of a sitting Supreme Court justice. He paused, letting the weight of the statement fill the air. I kept notes, dates, names, amounts, and I still have them. The audience reacted in a wave, gasps, low murmurs, the quick rustle of people reaching for their phones. The control booth caught every reaction, broadcasting the faces of shock to millions watching at home. On Twitter, hashtags multiplied like sparks hitting dry grass. Alito's eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. Then again, and again. It was a small movement, but the cameras caught it each time. His lips pressed into a thin line. His hands gripped the table until the knuckles turned pale. Mercer's voice stayed calm, almost too calm. I didn't want to come forward, but seeing this tonight, I couldn't stay silent. The integrity of the court isn't just a phrase, it's supposed to mean something. His image froze for a second as the feed caught up his words hanging in the charged air. Jasmine didn't move. The audience didn't blink. Even Alito seemed to realize the ground under him had shifted for good. Was this the moment a Supreme Court justice's career would crumble? The fallout was instant. Within minutes, every major network had broken into their regular programming. Clips of the debate looped on giant screens, Alito's voice promising a beach house, Mercer's calm testimony, Jasmine's unshakable stare. Talk show hosts dissected every word, every pause, every twitch of Alito's jaw like it was evidence in a criminal trial. Cable news anchors leaned into their cameras, voices low and urgent. Legal analysts debated impeachment procedures in real time. On late-night talk shows, monologues turned sharp, drawing laughs that quickly faded into uneasy silence. The scandal wasn't just news anymore, it was the country's newest obsession. Outside the Supreme Court, a sea of people gathered under the glow of streetlights. Handmade signs rose above the crowd. Justice for the people, no one above the law. Resign now. Chants rolled down the marble steps in rhythmic waves, echoing into the night. The cold air carried the sound across the city like a drumbeat no one could ignore. Civil rights groups issued joint statements within hours. Leaders called Jasmine's stand a national wake-up call and proof that truth still has power in a rigged system. In churches, community centers, in union halls, her name was spoken like a rallying cry. She had become more than a congresswoman in that moment, she was a symbol. On social media, the momentum only grew. Hashtags demanding Alito's resignation topped trending lists worldwide. Short clips of Jasmine's words racked up millions of views in hours. Memes appeared, but so did calls for congressional hearings, judicial reform, and criminal investigation. The line between public outrage and political pressure was blurring fast. Inside the court's marble halls, the mood was different, tense defensive bracing for impact. Some justices reportedly avoided the press entirely. Others offered vague statements about integrity without naming names. Behind closed doors, aides whispered about the possibility of a resignation, but no one dared say it on record. Jasmine watched from her office, the glow of the television reflecting in her eyes. She knew momentum like this could change the game, or be crushed if her opponent found the right lever to pull. But what if Alito still had one last card to play? It started with a single headline on a fringe news site. By the next morning, it had spread like wildfire. Grainy, poorly lit photos of Jasmine doctored to make her look reckless flooded social media feeds. Fake quotes twisted out of context claimed she had a personal vendetta against the court. The speed was staggering, the coordination unmistakable. Cable pundits who had been cautiously praising her 2 nights ago now raised questions about her motives. Anonymous accounts pushed hashtags painting her as untrustworthy. Even a few voices in her own party stayed silent, avoiding cameras and letting the smear take root. In politics, silence could cut deeper than outright attack. Jasmine scrolled through the chaos on her phone, jaw tight. She had seen dirty tricks before, but this was different. This wasn't just to discredit her, it was meant to drain her momentum, to make the public doubt what they'd heard with their own ears. Every repost, every fake headline was a brick in a wall they wanted to build around her credibility. In the quiet of her office, her longtime advisor Carl stepped in. His hair was grayer now, but his eyes carried the same fire from the first campaign they'd fought together. He dropped a thick folder on her desk clippings, screenshots, timelines. They're coming at you from every angle, he said. This isn't just Alito. This is the machine. Jasmine looked up at him, her voice low. So they think this will scare me into backing off. Carl didn't flinch. He leaned on the desk, meeting her eyes. You chose this fight. Now you finish it. The words hung in the air, not as advice, but as a challenge. She leaned back, letting the weight of it settle. Fear had no place here. She thought of the crowds outside the court, of the people who had reached out to say she spoke for them. The smear was ugly, yes, but it was also proof she was hitting where it hurt. Her fingers tapped the desk, slow and deliberate. The plan forming in her mind wasn't just to survive this attack, it was to make them regret ever starting it. Could she turn his smear into her strongest weapon? The announcement came just after sunrise. A special congressional committee had called for one final public hearing, Alito and Jasmine face-to-face, no filters, no edits. The date was set for the very next day. It was the kind of headline that stopped people mid-sip of their coffee. Across the country, TV schedules shifted. Networks cleared airtime. For millions of Americans over 50, this wasn't just politics anymore. It was the championship game, the final round of a fight they'd been watching unfold like a high-stakes thriller. Talk radio buzzed with predictions. Some swore Alito would try to stonewall. Others said Jasmine would land the knockout. In her office, Jasmine stood over a table littered with folders, flash drives, and handwritten notes. The smear campaign had failed to slow her down. If anything, it had sharpened her resolve. This hearing wasn't just her chance to expose one man's corruption. It was her chance to show the country that even the highest bench in the land wasn't above accountability. Carl entered quietly, setting down a small black case. It's ready, he said. She didn't have to ask what he meant. Inside was her final piece of evidence, the last gift for Alito. Something so concrete, so undeniable that no spin or smear could erase it. She rested her hand on the case for a moment, feeling its weight. The buzz outside was deafening. News crews camped along the Capitol steps. Protesters and supporters gathered side by side, their chants clashing in the cold air. Every camera in the city seemed pointed at one building, waiting for the doors to open. That night, Jasmine rehearsed in an empty conference room. Her voice was steady, her pacing deliberate. She wasn't going there to trade insults or relive the debate. She was going there to end the conversation once and for all. Alito, meanwhile, was spotted leaving a closed-door meeting with his legal team. No statements, no cameras, just a quick glance toward the reporters before disappearing into the back of a black sedan. Whatever his plan was, he wasn't showing it yet. In less than 24 hours, one truth would be impossible to bury. The hearing room was packed, cameras positioned at every angle. The air carried that charged courtroom stillness, the kind where every cough sounds too loud. Jasmine sat at the witness table, a single folder in front of her. Across the aisle, Samuel Alito avoided her gaze, flanked by his attorney, a man in a dark suit who looked like he hadn't slept in days. When the chairman gave her the floor, Jasmine didn't waste a second. She opened the folder and slid a stack of printed emails into view. The committee screens lit up, displaying subject lines that made the room stir regarding coastal property agreement, revised ruling language. Each message traced a trail from Alito to the lobbyist, dates, times, and casual references to our mutual arrangement. Gasps broke the hush as Jasmine moved to the next page, text messages. The words were plain confirmation of the beach house transfer once a decision was finalized. The emojis between them almost made it worse, a smug wink in the middle of corruption. Alito's face tightened, but he stayed silent. His attorney leaned in, whispering something urgent, but Jasmine's timing was perfect. The microphone picked up the rustle of paper, the click of her pen, not a single word from their side. The documents sat there in black and white, the kind of evidence that didn't need interpretation. The chairman asked if Alito wished to respond. His lips parted, but nothing came. He glanced at his lawyer, then back to the papers as if searching for a crack to exploit. There was none. Even the reporters in the back seemed to forget to type, caught in the gravity of the moment. Jasmine leaned back slightly, her voice calm. The American people deserve a judiciary that serves them, not the highest bidder. Her words carried across the chamber, quiet enough to force everyone to listen, sharp enough to leave a mark. Alito's attorney adjusted his tie but stayed mute. Cameras zoomed in on the justice's face, catching the faint twitch at his temple. The committee members exchanged looks that said more than any speech could. Would the committee dare to act? For a heartbeat after Jasmine's final words, the chamber stayed still. Then a single pair of hands began to clap, slow, deliberate. Another joined, and then the sound swelled, rolling through the hearing room until the entire gallery was on its feet. The applause was not polite. It was the sound of a dam breaking. Committee members who usually kept their expressions locked behind stone faces were clapping too. Even some staffers along the walls couldn't hide their reactions. Reporters craned over benches to capture the moment, shutters clicking in rapid bursts. Jasmine remained seated for a moment longer, letting the noise wash over her before standing to acknowledge it. The chairman's gavel struck 3 times before the room quieted. He cleared his throat, his voice firm. This committee will initiate a formal investigation into the allegations presented here today against Justice Samuel Alito. The sentence landed with the weight of history, sending another ripple of reaction through the crowd. Alito sat rigid, his attorney scribbling furiously on a legal pad. The cameras found his face tight and unreadable before cutting back to Jasmine. In the close-up, her eyes carried something rare, a glint of relief tempered by the steel of what still lay ahead. She knew this was only one battle in a longer war. As the room began to empty, the applause started again, smaller but no less sincere. People leaned over the railing to shake her hand to tell her she had done what no one else had dared. The veteran in the navy blazer was there too, offering a quiet nod as she passed. She walked out into the corridor, the noise fading behind her, replaced by the thud of her heels on marble. Cameras followed, questions flew, but her focus stayed forward. Her stride was steady, her head high, her mind already on the next move. Justice had taken its first step, but was it enough? The marble steps outside the Capitol glistened under the afternoon sun. As Jasmine emerged from the hearing, the roar of the crowd hit her like a wave. Signs waved in the air, camera flashes burst in her face, and voices called her name from every direction. She didn't rush past them. She stepped down slowly, reaching for the outstretched hands that lined her path. A firm handshake for one, a long hug for another. The veteran in the navy blazer was there, his eyes bright with pride, gripping her hand like it meant more than words could hold. Her smile wasn't for the cameras, it was for the people in front of her. A mother with her young daughter, tears streaking her face. A retired teacher holding a weathered copy of the Constitution. A young man who simply said, "Thank you," before stepping back into the crowd. Reporters shouted questions, but Jasmine stopped only once, turning toward the microphones. Power, she said, her voice carrying over the noise, is only as strong as the people who dare to hold it accountable. The cheer that followed was raw, unpolished, the kind that came from deep in the chest. She kept moving, the crowd parting and closing around her like a tide. Faces of every color, every age pressed forward. Some smiling through tears, others simply standing in quiet solidarity. The air felt heavy with something more than politics, it felt like possibility. Cameras captured every second, the clasped hands, the embraces, the look in her eyes that balanced exhaustion with fierce resolve. This wasn't just about one justice or one case. It was about the unshakable belief that truth and justice are not distant ideals, but responsibilities each citizen must protect. The sun dipped lower, painting the crowd in gold. Jasmine paused at the edge of the steps, looking back at the sea of faces. If you were in Jasmine's place, would you have pressed play? True power doesn't come from the seat you hold, but from the courage to stand unshaken when the storm bears down, and to wield truth even when it threatens the highest walls of power. When someone faces insult and slander, without flinching, they defend more than their own dignity. They guard the fragile trust that justice still belongs to the people. And when that moment comes, who will you choose to be? If this story stirred something in, you don't just scroll past. Like, share and subscribe to Hill Insights, where standing up to power becomes a voice for justice, and every stand matters. Tap the bell, because the next story might not just uncover corruption, it might remind us what we're fighting for. Which moment in this story will you never forget? Leave a comment, share your thoughts. Let's not just witness history, let's carry it forward together. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters and dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but to inspire reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching.